Yo, what's up, guys? Raptors unfortunately lose to the New York Knicks again, guys. Losing to them 112-95, guys. An expected loss again tonight by the Toronto Raptors, losing their 13th straight time now to the New York Knicks, guys. A really unfortunate loss tonight by the Raptors. Unfortunately, if the Raptors had won this game tonight, they really could have put themselves in the driver's seat to finish in fifth place, guys, in the NBA standings in the Eastern Conference, of course, but unfortunately with the Atlanta Hawks win tonight, Raptors losing tonight, Atlanta is now back in the fifth seed. Now it all comes down to Sunday night against the Brooklyn Nets at 6 o'clock for the Raptors to clinch a top 6 spot in the Eastern Conference, guys. Now, obviously, we knew the Raptors were going to have a difficult time winning this game tonight. Second night of a back-to-back, of course. The Raptors' record against the Knicks obviously is 0-13 since 2021, guys. So we obviously know that the Raptors were going to have an uphill battle tonight, especially without guys like RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Colin Murray-Boyles as well. So without three guys, three starters as well. CMB could technically be a starter if you wanted to, even though he does come off the bench. You knew it was going to be really difficult for the Raptors to find a way to win this game, especially with the matchups. It was going to be a matchup nightmare tonight for the Raptors with Jamal Shead guarding Jalen Brunson. You had Jakob Poeltl at times on Karl-Anthony Towns, and you saw it in this game tonight. It was an absolute disaster, to say the least. We've seen Cat and Brunson dominate the Raptors at times, but when you see this game tonight, and the Knicks could potentially be the Raptors' opponent in the first round, if the Raptors do find a way to beat Brooklyn on Sunday, and say if Atlanta does beat Miami, the Raptors are going to be in sixth place playing the New York Knicks, guys, in a week's time from now. So it's going to be real difficult for the Raptors, guys. Even though they did miss three starters, the matchups, it's going to be very difficult to match up against guys like Towns and Brunson. It's possible that maybe Coach Darko has to play Colin Murray-Boyles for matchup reasons because Jakob Poeltl, I think we could all agree, guys, that Jakob Poeltl's not a guy who can play defense on the perimeter, will get dominated on back cuts, on screens. It will be an absolute disaster, to say the least, if we see Jakob Poeltl guarding Karl-Anthony Towns in a playoff series. Now, the game, of course, didn't start off great. The Knicks, we know that they dominate the Raptors. Started off hot again. The Raptors, unfortunately, took them a little bit of time to get involved in the game, but it was a little bit of a tight quarter. I felt probably the tightest quarter of the bloody game, for God's sakes. Jacoby Walter, who's been shooting the ball lights up from behind the arc since the All-Star break, shooting over 45% from behind the arc, guys. He had 8 points in that first quarter alone, 3 of 4 from the field, guys, with a couple three-pointers. He led the way from the Raptors in scoring in the first quarter, guys. Then you had Mamu with 5, Mobile had 4, you had Brendan with 4, but then you have guys like Scotty, you have Jakob Poeltl, and then you have Jamal Shead and AJ Lawson, who had 0 points in that first quarter. Especially with Scotty. He's been very unproductive the last few weeks, of course. I think we can all agree on that. He hasn't been himself. He's clearly dealing with something. I don't know what it is, but he has not been the same. Again tonight, not having a great first quarter. 0 points, 0 for 3 from the field. If you were going to want to win this game tonight, you needed Scotty to have a big offensive night tonight. And that's not what happened tonight for Scotty Barnes and the Raptors, guys. The Raptors clearly didn't seem like they had any urgency to win this game with their level of play tonight. I just didn't sense it through the 4 quarters tonight. It seems like the Raptors were content on whatever the result was tonight, and hopefully they beat Brooklyn on Sunday, and hope to God that Miami somehow finds a way and beats the Hawks, even though Miami does still have an opportunity to fix their placement for the play-in. It's going to be a really tough battle for the Heat to beat Atlanta, who's just been lights out the second half of this season. They've just been in incredible form. The Heat, they clinched the Hawks, they've been in incredible form, guys, clinching a playoff spot as well tonight, Atlanta. So, it's all going to come down to Sunday, but this game here, guys, you just saw the amount of flaws the Raptors showed against a better team like the Knicks. Like, after one quarter, you could see that Brunson and Towns were going to have a field day. Like, after one quarter, you had Brunson and Towns already with 13 points. You knew it was going to be a long night for the Raptors, guys. Because Towns and Brunson combined for 27 at halftime, for God's sakes. The Raptors could not contain them. Brunson collapsed the defense, drove the lane. He had 14 points in the paint tonight out of his 29 points. Same with Karl-Anthony Towns. He had 14 points in the paint out of his 22. So those two there, guys, were just absolutely dominating, down low in the paint there. The paint. They were kicking out the ball when they had the openings there. Just really difficult for the Raptors matchup-wise. With the screen and rolls, the Raptors would get dominated on at times. Their shot making, the Knicks would make their threes. The Raptors defense collapsed too many times in this game. And it's going to be even more difficult if the Raptors have to play this team in a playoff series, in a 7-game series. Like, I really don't expect the Raptors to beat the Knicks in a 7-game series because of the way the Knicks have dominated the Raptors. But what I say, the pressure would be on the Knicks to beat the Raptors. Absolutely. Will the Knicks beat the Raptors? I would think so. But obviously, you got to play the game. It's never a guarantee. But the way the Knicks were playing in this game, the way the Raptors were playing, the way they were defending in this game, the way the Raptors were careless with the basketball, turning the ball over, guys. The other night against Miami, the Raptors were fantastic with the ball, barely turned the ball over. I think they turned the ball over 6 times last night. Wasn't a lot of turnovers, only had 1 turnover at halftime. And then tonight you have 9 turnovers at the half. The Knicks had 17 points off turnovers. They were shooting 48% from the field, out-rebounding the Raptors. Had 25 rebounds compared to our 23, guys. Knicks did move the ball well, had 12 assists, guys, on 20 made field goals. They had 26 points in the paint compared to our 16. That's where the Knicks were dominating, getting offensive rebounds, getting second chance opportunities. And, in a 7-game series, these things are going to matter. Second chance opportunities on net there, getting offensive rebounds. These are key factors that you say to yourself, the Raptors are just a step below the Knicks, a pace below the Knicks. You could see it in the play tonight. The Knicks had 4 steals as well, like the careless turnovers, like I mentioned, some questionable shot decisions by the Raptors. It's really frustrating to know that the Raptors, playing 27 games against top 10 teams in the NBA, they're 5-22. Like, it was so obvious they were going to lose this game tonight. They tried to battle back. The Raptors, they cut it down to 6 at one point, but they missed some shots, turned the ball over at key moments in the game. That one turnover that Mamu had where he tried to pass it to BI from the wing to the point there. It's like, those are bad passes, high-risk turnovers, and we saw that too many times tonight with the Raptors, very careless with their basketball. Their superstars didn't come up tonight. BI and Scotty were just too bloody quiet tonight. Scotty was not good on both ends of the floor tonight. Brandon Ingram, after dropping 38 last night, only has 15 tonight. This is why people say about Brandon Ingram, he dominates against the lower opponents, the weaker opponents, but when he plays against the great opponents, against great defenders, perimeter defenders especially, he disappears, he gets bullied, he's out-physical, out-manned, and it's really frustrating. You saw that again tonight. Some people are saying that he's going to overtake Tyrese Halliburton as the most overrated player in the NBA. And do I agree with that? And sometimes yes and sometimes no, but these type of games here really worry me. BI finishes off with 16. Scotty had 15. Like, it's not good enough by these two guys. Scotty's making a lot of money. So is Brandon Ingram. In these type of games, they need to step up. Now, maybe the Raptors do not want to play their hand. They were missing 3 starters, like I mentioned. And the Knicks are possibly being an opponent. The Raptors wanted to keep things, inside their pocket for the playoffs. I don't bloody know. But to see the matchups they had today, Mamu had difficulties tonight as well, guarding Karl Anthony Towns at times, guys. Even though Mamu did finish off with 17 points tonight, defensively he wasn't great tonight. Not everybody was great tonight defensively. Jamal Shead had his difficulties tonight against Jalen Brunson because Jalen Brunson's an all-star and just a great point guard and a great all-around player. So you knew Jamal Shead was going to have his difficulties. He played good defense at some possessions, but unfortunately not all the time, guys. And Jalen Brunson had his moments where he just dominated and went to work on guys like Jamal Shead, So I don't blame the Raptors totally, but you just know that this team here is just not good enough at times, and the Knicks are just a better team than us. Matchup-wise, the Knicks are just better. They have guys like Bridges and Anunoby, of course, and then Brunson and Towns, obviously. So these guys here are absolute dogs on defense. You got some great elite scorers on the Knicks. It's going to be really difficult for the Raptors to even possibly win a game. I'm worried they're going to get embarrassed and maybe get swept in the playoffs. I don't know. Hopefully they don't. But these games that they played against the Knicks this year, guys, have just been not promising at all, to say the least. Jacoby Walter was one of the only few promising signs for the Raptors tonight. Having 15 points on 5-9 shooting, guys. Jacoby continues to play well, but unfortunately, it's a team sport. You win as a team, you lose as a team. And again, tonight we saw the Raptors just fall short again against a superior opponent. And OG didn't even play in the second half, for God's sakes. He left the game with an ankle injury. We obviously know OG has a lot of injury issues, of course, but, he might be ready for the playoffs. Who knows, guys? But really unfortunate to see the Raptors lose again tonight to the Knicks. You had Scotty and BI with underwhelming performances again tonight, 16 and 15. Scotty at 15, BI at 16, like I mentioned. Walter had 15. Mamu had 17. They were the only 4 guys in double figures. I like what A.J. Lawson brings to the table off the bench. Maybe the Raptors are going to convert his contract so he can play in the playoffs next week. So who knows what happens with him, guys. Mo Bol played 17 minutes, only had 6 points. Grady played 12 minutes, had 7 points. Elijah Martin played a little bit as well. Jamison Battle. But, when you don't have guys like CMB who can defend, well, he's a defensive nightmare for some teams. With him and Scotty, of course. RJ Barrett tonight, you don't have his offense. Even though he's a little bit of a liability defensively, you still needed his offense. He was huge for the Raptors last night with those 22 points. And then quickly apparently couldn't even walk last night after the game. So that foot is clearly bothering him. Hopefully he's good to go for the playoffs. I don't think he'll probably play Sunday night either, and then maybe get ready for the playoffs, possibly if the Raptors do beat Brooklyn. If the Raptors do not beat Brooklyn, and Orlando and Atlanta both, when the Raptors fall into the play-in, it would be an absolute disaster for the Raptors. I don't want to think about that right now. They got to get business done against the Nets on Sunday, guys. But you just knew guys like Brunson and Towns, of course, we're going to have a field day. Like I said, Brunson finishes off with 29, Towns with 22. Bridges had 13. Alvarado had 12. Another nice player that they added at the deadline. Really nice young player there. You had Clarkson who had 10 as well, guys. So, and the Knicks were missing, guys. They had no Robertson. They had no Kolek. They had no McBride. So they had some guys as well missing. Robertson's obviously been a big miss for the Knicks at times this year. He's been injured a few times this year. So you just know, guys, that the Raptors have to come up with a better game plan if they do end up playing the Knicks in the playoffs. Hopefully Miami can beat Atlanta. We beat Brooklyn and we can play in the 5th seed and play Cleveland. That would be a better matchup, I feel, for the Raptors. But obviously it's not in their hands anymore, guys. You just have to beat Brooklyn in terms of that being in your hands. But then everything else falls into Miami and what happens with Orlando. If hopefully Miami beats Atlanta and everything else, guys. But really unfortunate loss tonight for the Raptors. It gets more and more frustrating as well, guys. To see the Raptors against these top 10 teams in the NBA just continuously fall to these better teams, guys. Like that second quarter was pathetic as well. Getting outscored 29-15. Those are the type of quarters where you say to yourself, that's how you lose ball games. And do I really expect the Raptors to beat the Knicks in a 7-game series? No. But anything can happen, guys. But it's just not good enough at times offensively. Getting called for too many times 3 in the key, turning the ball over, on illegal screens or just bad passes. The Knicks exposing us defensively with the open threes, collapsing in the paint there. The Raptors defense getting all rebounded at times in this game. It's just not good enough, guys. 43 rebounds compared to our 40, guys. We had actually more offensive rebounds compared to the Knicks, but they were the better team in the first half. They had 27 points off turnovers. The Raptors had 18 turnovers, guys. Knicks had 58 points in the paint compared to the Raptors 40, guys. So those were some of the key factors as to why the Knicks won this game. They just dominated down low in the paint there. Got to the free throw line 27 times. And the Knicks are obviously just a way better all-around team than the Raptors, guys. We obviously know where the Raptors' deficiencies are. It's going to be up to this front office to really improve this team in the offseason. And obviously there's not a lot of trust right now with Bobby Webster. The way this team's constructed right now, they're just like right in the middle. They're not that great, but they're not that bad. They're just good, But it's really frustrating right now how this season has gone. Obviously this team has improved dramatically compared to last season. You have 16 more wins compared to last season. But at the end of the day, against these top 10 teams in the NBA, the Raptors show their flaws, show their deficiencies still. The Knicks, man, they just have this team's number, man. It's just really frustrating to say the least. I do not want to know what it would be like in a playoff series, but it's very possible that could be happening in a week's time from now, guys. One more game left against the Brooklyn Nets, guys, a team that's obviously tanking. Hopefully the Raptors get their business done at home. They're 6-1 of the last 7 games at home, the Raptors, so I'm sure that the Raptors will have a good game. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they're ready to go for that game. Hopefully they beat Brooklyn, get a top 6 spot, and then we'll see where the chips fall, guys, with the rest of the NBA, and then we'll see what happens, hopefully, in the playoffs, guys, if the Raptors do end up getting there. But we'll have your guys' thoughts and opinions on this one, guys. It's another bad game tonight by the Raptors. You saw some holes and deficiencies. You saw some things that the Raptors need to improve on. Maybe playing guys like CMB in a matchup against the Knicks instead of a guy like Jakob Poeltl who's just going to get exposed. So that's one option you can look at, guys. Coach Darko's got a lot of thinking to do. First, get focused on the Brooklyn game and then see who their matchup is. But we'll have your guys' thoughts and opinions on this one, guys. It's another bad loss to the New York Knicks, guys. Just continuously having the Raptors number, man. It's just when are we going to find a way to beat this bloody team? Hopefully sooner rather than later, guys. But we'll love to your guys' thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for watching. As always, like this video. Subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Raptors, go as always, guys. See you guys on the next episode of Raptors Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.